Yep.
Yeah, welcome to the Bloodline podcast. My name's Ethan Harrison, and my goal for this podcast is to talk about the difficulties of navigating life as a young adult, as a young man, leaning on my father as a resource on giving me guidance and direction.
The Bloodline podcast is about men talking to men, one generation to the next. And it matters to have a father and a son having a conversation that not everybody finds easy. So we're calling this the Bloodline podcast. And for me, when I think about Bloodline, I think about family heritage, legacy, the fact that I'm actually going to pass something forward. And I love the fact that we actually have two generations here. Ethan, what does it mean to you?
Right. Yeah, I think it really does tie into our family connection. I think as I've grown up and looked around with peers, I do believe that we have a special connection as father and son. And I think naming it the Bloodline Podcast has this masculine tone to it. And I do think that's important. I think the fact that we're two men talking about life, about our experiences growing up as men, I think the Bloodline Podcast has that ring to it where people know, yeah, we're talking as guys on what that means.
I wish that was the case that we could say more of our friends, more of our peers had good relationships, father son. I do think I have one of those now, but it wasn't always easy. And I would say that my father probably reflects that his relationship to his dad wasn't the best. What is it that makes it unique for you and me? Something that you would just say, oh, this is different.
Right. I really think that our openness of communication and our trust of one another, where I really do think I could tell you anything, is really key. Super important, something I really care about. I recognize when I look at my friends and I hear about their relationships with their parents, one of the common themes is, oh, I would never tell my dad this, or I need to make sure at all costs I keep this hidden, you know? And it makes me sad, yeah, that I feel like that's not what we have as a father and son.
Yeah, we've talked for a long time about foregrounding our friendship. I remember a hard conversation that we had about duplicity early on because I grew up in the South. I grew up in a Christian family, and I just knew how I was supposed to behave when there was an adult in the room. All of the yes sirs, yes ma'ams, sometimes even a little syrupy sweet. And you and I made the very deliberate choice, like to tell it like it is, to be transparent and talk to each other in real ways.
Yeah, and I think as I have gotten to know you more and more as I've grown into young adulthood, something that I really admire about you is you said at Steadman, I want to be the same person, consistent through and through, no matter who's in the room. I just want to be known as the same guy. And that's something I really want to continue to work on and build, is that no matter who I'm with, no matter who I'm talking to, young or old, professional, casual, I'm consistent, saying the same things, holding the same values close to my heart instead of switching who I am depending on who I'm with.
Yeah. So our desire is to actually give a little bit of a window into that. So those of you who are watching, this is going to be a conversation between a father and a son. And we want to pull ourselves apart a little bit. So we're going to use a tool called social identity. It really looks at who we are and it just says what's given, what's chosen, what's core. I was an only child, didn't choose that. Born in America, didn't choose my passport country, English speaking. Those are a few things that are part of my given identity. What about you, Ethan?
Right. So I am the youngest of two older brothers. So there's three of us total. And I would say that's a given. Um, One of the things that was given to me was definitely my upbringing location wise, where I grew up. So when I was 5, I moved for the first time with my whole family over to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And from there, started a life of bouncing around to a lot of different places without ever really having one hometown, I would say. So that's something definitely given. A chosen for me is I love connecting with people. I really enjoy trying to be extroverted, being able to talk to whoever they are, whoever someone is, their background. Yeah, I just want to be able to connect with people.
I mentioned a few things about my given already. I'm a Southerner. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Actually, met my wife in Birmingham, Alabama, when we were quite young. We reconnected when I was at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. I worked for a long season at the Center for Creative Leadership, and I think that really informed who I am today. And some of my core values, things that I care about, friendship, development, faith, family. prayer. These are things that make me unique and sort of drive my decision making. Anything else on the social identity front?
Right. I guess I should hit my core values. When you tear back all the layers, what do I care about? Um, I think connecting with people, being selfless is a big one that I try to work on. I think our culture and our society today is really inward focused. It's pointing inward. How do I get the upper hand? How do I have the best life? All of the above. And I see that and I just feel like that's not what's worth it for me. I really enjoy blessing other people, making them feel seen, making them feel heard. I think that's one of the big ties towards psychology for me. I just want to be able to help people with their burdens, things that are hard. I like to be a part of that and help them feel seen and loved. So yeah.
You definitely have a trait that I appreciate and admire, and that's being other-minded. It makes me want to be more like that myself. So I hope we are iron sharpening iron. Another thing that's unique about you is that, as you said, you started moving around a lot at age 5. You are what we would call a third culture kid. TCKs get a lot of attention these days, but what does it mean to you to be a TCK? What's something that you've learned about yourself through that lens?
Right. So second question people ever ask you when they meet you, they say, "What's your name? Where are you from?" When people ask where you're from, you got to think, okay, where have I spent the most time? What is my, I don't know, allegiance to in terms of sports, anything like that. And for me, I don't really have one of those. Like I said, I grew up in the United States, was born in Greensboro. But at age 5, I moved over to Africa, to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and had a back and forth, but spent a total of 11 years there. And especially during high school, spent ninth grade, graduated high school over in Ethiopia. That really shaped the things I care about, the culture that was influencing me from the outside, but also spent my middle school years over in Mississippi, over in Tupelo, and am now in college in the United States. And so I have these two big cultures that are very different from each other, that have shaped me to who I am. Kind of those external things that I just grew up there can't change really the culture around you. And so who has that shaped me to be? I don't quite feel American. There's a lot of pop culture, a lot of things that are different about me compared to the average American. And I definitely am not Ethiopian, was not born into that culture, clearly have an American background. So yeah, it's kind of balancing these two different cultures and making this third one out of it.
Yeah. A lot of times people will describe third culture, you come from a circle culture, you live in a square culture, but you're somewhere in between. That's the triangle, the middle space. They don't really have a space for third culture adults, but I do consider myself in this space of having lived overseas for 15 plus years. Started living overseas actually when I was in college, so was a study abroad student in England. Spent a lot of time in places like Brussels, Belgium, and then we made this big move. There is something about being a global citizen that I think appeals to us. And it also knits back to that idea of being other-minded. I really like to see from a different perspective the way that people see their world. I believe that you have that interest as well. You pick that up really, really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Riffing off the other-minded thing, I do believe that having grown up in another culture where I don't feel immediately fully American, I really do appreciate seeking out people from other cultures. I remember when I was just a freshman at Chapel Hill during my first semester in the dorm, met a guy who was a grad student from Switzerland, and I immediately was pulled to him. Out of all people, like why not just the other freshman American students that would be my expected peer group? But here's this older, I think almost 30-year-old grad student from Switzerland, and I wanted to get to know him. I wanted to hear more about his story just because I knew that he came from another background, didn't quite know how to integrate, and I wanted to be that friend. And I think that's just one example of my background drawing me towards people, yeah, especially that I see that are just not quite in their cultural context and wanting to be that bridge builder.
I see that. There's sort of another level of empathy that we have. I can't help but when I go to a mall, a church, anywhere that I am, I'm finding that person who's typically the outsider, a little bit different, and I'm drawn to them. And there's a bridge building that's a part of. One of the things that you and I talked about is that we we don't want to travel just for travel's sake. So maybe we can back into this. But what is it that you love about travel? Having lived in Ethiopia, you've been to some interesting places. What is it that you want to get out of those experiences?
Right. The most important thing that I think that comes to mind is that ability to make a connection with someone else that I will keep forever in my toolkit for whatever reason. So for example, for you, I think you do this very well, and I had to learn that this is appropriate, is if you see someone that you know looks like they're from a culture that you recognize, you can ask about it. And I know people are often scared, especially with just cultures that are very different from them, to ask, "Hey, are you Ethiopian? Are you Ugandan?" I had to practice that because I thought, "Oh, I'm going to offend someone. I'm going to say the wrong thing. They're going to ask, why am I asking that?" But when I travel and all of these different glimpses into people's lives, I'm not fully in that culture, but I see someone who maybe is wearing something Ethiopian or looks Habesha, looks Ethiopian. I can ask them, "Hey, do you happen to be from this area? What do you know about this area?" And even if I'm slightly wrong, even if I'm very wrong, it opens the conversation. What is your cultural background? So that's one example. Now I think of my time in Scotland, my time all across different countries in Europe. I noticed something about somewhere I've been. Hey, is that a Scottish accent? Tell me about that. Oh, it's not Scottish, it's Irish. Doesn't matter. I have a connection there, you know?
I love listening to accents, and in fact, I played off that just last weekend. Heard what I thought was a Scottish accent, and I'm like, "Hey, can you tell me more? Where are you from?" So the "where are you from? Where are you really from?" is a powerful way, and it peels back the layers pretty quickly. I do think that once we've been to other places, we want to find the way to connect the dots, and we find that there's lots of opportunity if we actually listen to accents, to things that people are interested in, just paying attention to the cues. You've been to some interesting places. You mentioned Scotland. I once said you did a backflip into college, but maybe say a little bit more about your time there. It wasn't just a quick trip, it was a deeper dive.
All right. So finishing up my senior year in Ethiopia, I was pushed by my guidance counselor, everyone around me, apply to college. Where are you going to go? What's your next step for your future? And my immediate direction was North Carolina, back to my roots, I guess, back to where I was born. I had extended family there to rely on as a support system. So I put out a bunch of applications, probably about seven or so, only to North Carolina schools and then one art school in Georgia. But my top focus was this beach college called Wilmington, and the only reason I wanted to go there because it's a beach college. So that sounds fun. I love the water. I like to swim, and so I thought that was where I was going. And as I was applying to there, I sent out some other applications, Chapel Hill being one of them. And I remember as I was doing my application, there was one small box that said, "Hey, would you be even just slightly interested in studying abroad your first semester?" And I just clicked the box, didn't think twice about it. Applications come in, acceptance letters, rejection letters. I get an acceptance letter from Wilmington. Very disappointed. I thought I was going to get more aid, especially coming from an international background, applying out of state. Aid was something really important to me. Did not receive the aid I wanted. Was really upset about that. 2 days later, I think, got this really intriguing offer from Chapel Hill saying, "Hey, we have a conditional acceptance letter for you. You can come to our school, but you have to go to Scotland." And as I thought about it, I thought, "Have to." More like get to. I want to. That sounds really cool, especially after being disappointed in, I guess, what people say their top choices. Um, I made a hard pivot. I was going to go study abroad in Scotland and then come on back to Chapel Hill, having no idea what college life was going to be like.
Hearing you tell that story, I know it's an important one. And I also realize that it's important to a lot of young people trying to figure out that major step in life as they choose a college, choose a university. How do you make these decisions? We're going to come back to that in another podcast. So I want to like put a pin in that one and say, hey, how did we get where we are? That's an interesting father-son bloodline conversation. So we're going to come back to that one. Um, Tell me what was one of your best experiences traveling. So I know that you spent time in Scotland. You went to some beautiful places. You've also more recently been to places that are off the beaten path. What's one of your favorites?
Wow, that is a big question. I think Holistically, one of the most important character developing times and places that I went to was Jordan. We went to this mountain city called Ajloon, and I remember this was a big move for me. I was coming out of my middle school years, and I had the hope to continue in America. I thought I was going to stay in the United States, kind of really embrace being American. And Steadman and my mom decided to move back to Ethiopia, but we spent our summer. My father was on sabbatical in Jordan. And I remember being very scared. I did not know what to expect. I had loved my summers in the United States. I loved going to beach houses, going to lakes, just having the classic American summer. And I had seen photos. I had never been, but my two older brothers and my dad had been to Jordan, and I saw pictures of them on camelback in the middle of a desert.
I
And
totally remember this. Like you were convinced we were moving to the desert. And the funny thing was, I was like, oh no, Ashloon is the mountains. It's green. There's olive trees. There's all kinds of hiking. And then we flew into Amman, Jordan. And you
right,
looked out the window. I remember this very distinctly.
if you don't know anything about Amman, it's dead flat, some high-rise buildings because it's the capital, but it is in the middle of the desert, it looks like. And so I'm looking out the window and I look over at my dad and I just look betrayed. I felt betrayed. I was like, where have you brought me? This was my fear, and now we're in the desert. But we land there and we get in a car. We drive about an hour and a half into these beautiful mountains. We're staying in this small home at the very end of a road, very secluded and quiet. But right down the road, about like a 30-minute walk, we had some really great family friends that at the time I didn't know very well, but throughout the 3 months that we were there, ended up becoming super close. I would go over every morning and spend my morning till my evening there, just hanging out with fellow kids my age. And I can talk more about why that trip was so great, but that was very important.
I remember we sort of decided on this rather deliberately because we knew we were stealing our kids away from life in America in junior high, early high school, and we were taking them back to Ethiopia to a developing world context. And we really thought about the fact that Jordan was sort of a middle ground. It was a space in between. It was sabbatical, it was rest, and it was meant to be a place that we could not only recharge by going to places like Aqaba, seeing the Red Sea, but also spend some intense time as a family. And I do think that that helped build this bridge that you and I have, the relationship and the friendship that we have. It also planted the seed for Arabic, and you stayed with that one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that time in the Middle East, like you said, it's that place in between where I wasn't fully ripped out of my comfortable, I guess, comfortable life in the United States. I still had um, a lot of the luxuries, like they had the snacks that I knew of, the food that I knew of. It wasn't hard to get. Um, but yeah, I think that culture too was a really nice culture to step into of people that are just really hospitable. If you don't know about Middle Eastern culture, they're so interested in honoring you, showing you a good time, really making you feel known and seen. And so it wasn't like I was stepping into a culture where people noticed that I was and wanted to almost harass me, but wanted to embrace me, wanted me to see their culture, enjoy their culture with them. And that's something that I've really loved to appreciate about the Middle East in general. And then, yeah, the language is really cool. It's very similar to the language that I grew up around in Ethiopia. Lots of the same, I don't even know the word for that, colloquial sounds, the kh types of sounds. And I'm left-handed. That was another big thing for me, which is silly, but I had to take a language in college, and I thought, why not do one where I'm writing it in a way that not many people think about, but is a huge advantage for me.
I've never heard that before until today. That's great. Yeah, start at the end of the book and write backwards because
Right.
it fits with your hand style. Um, you know, we wanted to land this podcast on the fact that we don't travel just for travel's sake. You've been to a lot of places. I remember when you were young, you wanted to keep up with going to a country for every year that you turned. So it was probably in Turkey when you were turning 13 that you wanted to go to your 13th country. You've been to a lot of places. I've been to a lot of places. What is it that drives us to that next place that we're going to? Any thoughts on that as we start to wind this podcast down?
Mm. Why do I go to more and more places? Again, it's deeper than just wanting to be well traveled. It's deeper than just wanting to impress people by saying, "Oh, I've been to this abnormally large number of countries." Um, Again, I think this ties back to what we were saying at the very beginning. I really love seeing other people's cultures and putting myself into them, not going just as a tourist, not going to just take pictures and to be blatantly, I don't know, American myself. I want to go and I want to step my foot into their culture, experience what their life is like. One, so I can appreciate it the most while I'm there, and then also take that with me and be able to share that with others, whether it's someone who is originally from that culture who is now not in their culture, and I get to meet them out in this big world, or I get to show that culture, that food that I love, that word that I loved, the art that I loved, with people that without me being able to share that would have ever experienced that. But yeah, I think it's a lot more than just wanting to go be a tourist. What about you?
Well, bottom line, people. I think that it's all about relationships. It's all about taking perspective, learning, listening. Yeah, I've been to 76 countries and I'm itching to get to the 77th. I don't know where that's going to be. It's usually client work that takes me there. But it's not about ticking the box. It really is about the people I'm going to meet, the things that I'm going to learn, and the ways in which that's going to pay itself forward, probably in this bridge building space. Now, when I see people from those cultures, from those places, I can talk about the capital city with some knowledge. I can talk about rural settings that I've been to. It's not like the tourist version of it, but it's about having really absorbed something unique about the place and something that I love and I can talk to them about for sure.
Right, absolutely.
All right. So we've got more to come on the Bloodline podcast. So stay tuned, friends. Ethan and I want to continue to unpack some of the things that matter to us most. We'll talk about social media. We'll talk about relationships. We'll talk about all kinds of things that helped us get where we are today. So if this is intriguing, stay tuned. Come back. We'll talk more on the Bloodline podcast.
Right. Thank you for joining us. And I'm looking forward to more conversations ahead and just seeing what we unpack.
Excellent. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you for listening in to this episode of the Bloodline podcast. Steadman, it was really great talking to you today, kind of about who we are, where we came from, the big things that have shaped our identity. For me, being a third culture kid, for you, being a global traveler, and how that's shaped our values, who we want to be as people going forward. Steadman, what are we going to be talking about next?
Thanks, Ethan. Next time on the Bloodline podcast, we'll be talking about relationships. We've both been a part of dating. We've both been a friend to other people and had people who've befriended us. There's a lot in terms of influence that's going on there. And we look forward next time pulling back the layers on that and having a father-son conversation about relationships.
See you next time.
Ciao.